Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it about one more minute as we see a number of attendees are still joining us today for 2011 Top B2B Marketing Practices, and we're going to be starting in just about a minute. All right, it looks like all of our attendees have flowed in. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, 2011 Top B2B Marketing Practices from Lead Generation to Marketing Automation. This webinar is brought to you today by Genius. And just a couple of quick housekeeping notes for you. Today is going to be an interactive webinar, and if you do want to submit questions about the content during the webinar, you can do so using your question panel on your GoToWebinar screen. And again, put in your questions at any time, and the speakers today will be addressing the questions at the end of the webinar. All attendees today will receive slides and a recording of today's webinar via an email from Marketing Sherpa tomorrow. And this will also include the chapter, the complimentary chapter available to all attendees today on marketing automation from Marketing Sherpa's 2011 B2B Marketing Benchmark Report. We have two speakers today. Myself, I'm Jen Doyle. I am Senior Research Analyst at Marketing Sherpa, and I cover B2B marketing, and I am the lead author of the 2011 B2B Marketing Benchmark Report on elevating marketing effectiveness from lead generation all the way to sales conversion. I'm a regular speaker at Marketing Sherpa events, a newsletter columnist and blog contributor, also a speaker for Sherpa and partner webinars like today. And I'll be joined by Matt West. And Matt has over a dozen years of experience in B2B marketing, and he's an expert in demand generation. He is currently the Director of Marketing at Genius, and he's a regular practitioner and thought leader of demand generation, lead nurturing, and marketing automation. Throughout today's webinar, Matt and I will be co-presenting, and I will be presenting key findings from our 2011 B2B Marketing Benchmark study, and Matt will chime in with real-world application of best practices for you today. So before we get going, I'd like to give you a little background on the data that you'll be presented with today. All of the data is based on the collections from our 2011 B2B benchmark study that we conducted in August of 2010. And we had 935 B2B marketers participating in this study on elevating marketing effectiveness from lead generation to sales conversion. And all of the content that you're presented with, whether it be in a webinar like today or in our benchmark reports, it's a direct result of what we have learned directly from the marketing community, sometimes in their very own words. And the marketing automation chapter from this report will be available from that email from Marketing Sherpa tomorrow post-webinar. And if all of you Twitter users would like to follow the conversation today on Twitter, we will be using the hashtag SherpaB2B. So now that you have your background, I'm going to get into our agenda for today's webinar. First, I'm going to talk about trends in B2B marketing, where we're going to look at the top challenges that we learned from our B2B study, and I'll also give you some key statistics regarding those challenges. And then we're going to get into our top 5 B2B marketing practices for 2011. First, we're going to look at knowing your marketing mix, where we'll talk about identifying the right inbound and outbound marketing tactics for your organization and for your audience. Then we're going to look at closing the loop with sound marketing analytics, where we'll talk about analyzing these tactics to find out which ones are working best to contribute leads that are going to build revenue for your organization. Our third tactic is aligning with your sales team, where we'll talk about encouraging communication and teamwork between sales and marketing departments in order to drive revenue. Fourth, we're going to look at identifying your sales and marketing funnel, and we're going to give you practical how-to information on how to do this, as well as the importance of this practice. And finally, we're going to talk about automating your lead management practices, where we really tie in all of the four previous best practices. It's all tying it in together and automating your lead management practices. So in our 2011 study, we asked organizations, which of the following marketing challenges are currently most pertinent to your organization? And we have here represented in this chart a number of challenges that we surveyed on. And the lighter colored bar is representing responses from our 2009 study. And the darker colored bar is representing our responses from our recent study conducted in August of 2010. And 78% of marketers indicated that generating high-quality leads was the greatest challenge. And this is truly a case of the quality being more challenging than the quantity. And as you can see, for a number of these challenges, such as generating high-quality leads, generating a high volume of leads, generating PR buzz, competing in lead generation across multiple media, all of these challenges are increasing in pertinence to organizations over time. You can see how the levels of pertinence are increasing for the 2010 numbers as opposed to the 2009 numbers. So as we saw in the previous slide, 34% of B2B organizations indicated that B2B challenges included marketing to a growing number of people involved in the sales process. And we see here in this chart, we asked our survey participants to identify the number of key decision makers that were involved in their buying decisions. And the majority of organizations face anywhere from 2 to 5 individuals as key decision makers involved in the sales process. And keep in mind, this is not even thinking about those influencers that are involved in the process who may not be key decision makers. So at a minimum, it's 2 to 5 individuals. And if you think about influencers, it's probably even more. Our third most pertinent challenge was marketing to a lengthening sales cycle, as 41% of B2B organizations indicated. As you can see in this chart here, we surveyed on the average length of B2B sales cycles, and 60% of B2B organizations are facing sales cycles greater than 3 months, as represented in this half, well, greater than half here. And less than 1 month is 10%. 1 to 3 months is 30%. So the majority of B2B organizations looking at a sales cycle greater than 3 months. And which organizations tend to have the longest sales cycle? Well, we found in our study, we broke out this data by organization size, deal sizes. Many of them had average deal sizes greater than 250,000, which was 27%. So there was a direct relationship between average deal size and length of sales cycle. So how do organizations best combat these challenges? Well, many of them are finding a solution in marketing automation software. And marketing automation is really more of a marketing process rather than just a software application. We asked our survey participants what their status of marketing automation implementation was. And if you're not currently considering this practice, you are, in fact, in the minority currently, as only 21% of organizations indicated that they had not yet begun this implementation and that they did not plan to, as represented by this slide here. The remaining respondents either are fully implemented, partially implemented, or intend to implement. So now that we've covered our background and our key challenges, we're ready to get into our first key practice for 2011, which is knowing your marketing mix. And what we're going to talk about in this section is identifying which marketing tactics are the most effective for B2B lead generation for your organization specifically. It's important to think about both inbound and outbound marketing tactics. In our study, we learned that inbound marketing tactics were rated as highly effective for B2B organizations, but it's important for you as an individual organization to look at which mix of inbound and outbound marketing tactics are going to work for your product selection and your target audience. And Matt in this section is going to cover for us best practices in selecting your mix. So here we have another chart from our 2011 study, and we asked, please indicate the effectiveness of the following marketing tactics for your organization. And we have a number of tactics listed here on the left, and we have a dark colored chart indicating very effective responses, this mid color representing somewhat effective, and this lighter color representing not effective. And inbound marketing tactics overall were rated highly effective, like SEO and webinars like today. I want to talk to you for a minute about the importance of website design, management, and optimization of the hub. As more and more organizations are adopting inbound marketing strategies, the importance of the website is greatly increasing. Because if you think about it, all this activity that's happening through SEO and PPC and social media, all of this traffic is being driven back to the organization's website. So it's really important to have that website well designed and well optimized for conversion. And that is precisely the reason why it has come in as our #1 tactic here. I want to talk to you for a minute about the perceptions of social media. At Marketing Sherpa, we conduct a number of studies on a wide range of topics, even outside of B2B. And one of the recent studies we conducted was on social marketing. And what we learned in that study was that the emerging trend in social marketing is that perceptions of the effectiveness of this channel are becoming greater as marketers become more mature with their practices. So as they gain more maturity in their execution, they're getting greater results out of this tactic. So we expect in next year's study that social media will be much higher on the list. In outbound marketing, we need to think about whether or not this is still relevant for our organizations. There are a number of outbound marketing tactics that have come in pretty effective in this chart, like telemarketing, email marketing, depending on how it's used, could be considered outbound. So we still need to think about these channels as relevant channels for our organizations. And now we're ready to hand it over to Matt so he can talk about best practices in selecting your mix.
Hi, good morning, West Coast, good afternoon, East Coast, and wherever you may be in the world. And thanks, Jen. So just really quickly, Jen just covered a lot of stuff in terms of what it takes to select your marketing mix. Your marketing mix, it will be different for, depending on what kind of organization you are, who your customers are. So I've just mapped out a couple of things to keep in mind to help determine what your marketing mix should be. So one of the things that we talk about is, this is something we'll see over and over throughout this event, which is, reviewing the patterns of your customers. Where do they come from? Who are they? How big is their company? What kind of company are they? What industry are they in? What's their role? Who in the organization played what role in the purchasing process? So go back, look at everything that you've done over the past, just go a year back even or 6 months back and try to spot some trends in who's buying and how they're buying. Then of those people, when you spot those trends, develop personas around them. Again, who they are, where they came from, what kind of companies they are, what roles they have in the company, as well as in the purchasing process. Then go out and look for the best places to connect with these people. So you'll also have the information in terms of, all right, if I'm looking for these kind of people, we've had a much better chance of reaching these types of people, had better conversations in these types of areas. Look at those trends again. Then once you develop how you're going to reach each of these personas in each of these areas, it's important to have content specific to the following. So again, persona, where they are in the buying process. So maybe this VP of operations for a manufacturing firm, he's a key decision maker, but this guy may be really high up in the purchasing process. So you want to make sure to give him high-level information as to obviously why these kinds of solutions are important for them, etc. But making sure that for each of these people you have that level all the way down through the interest and evaluation and the sale and the post-sale and all that stuff. But making sure that once you develop these personas, these people, how you're going to talk to them, you have appropriate content for them throughout the process. Then again, if you're not already doing it, track everything from above the funnel in all of your outbound marketing activities to unknown audiences, all the way through to every behavior those people take as they interact with your company, as they interact with your website, as they interact with your salespeople, your telesales, what have you. And then again, repeat what works. Get rid of the rest, and make the best work. It's clearly the theory of evolution. So at that, I will move on to best practice 2. Jen, do you want to take us through that?
Thanks, Matt. And I like the suggestion number 5, track everything, and that's exactly what we're going to get into in this next section. Close the loop with sound marketing analytics. In this section, we're going to talk about the importance of conducting regular marketing analysis for continual improvement. And it's really important to look at a number of metrics, not just one. Look at return on investment, cost per lead, cost per acquisition, volume of qualified leads, not just inquiries, funnel conversion rates, etc. And when you're looking at cost per lead, that has a really interesting section that he's going to talk about and how this is not the end-all, be-all. He'll show you a really interesting example on that coming up soon. But another thing that this is going to do is it's going to help you communicate marketing's value to the C-suite of your organization. It's very difficult to convey this in marketing terms to non-marketing professionals, right? So when you're talking about things like return on investment, a lot of marketers who use a straight calculation and communicate this as a percentage, it often obscures the data, and it prevents different individuals from seeing the real dollar value. So we asked organizations to indicate how effective the following metrics were in helping your organization evaluate marketing ROI. And we learned that common evaluations of marketing ROI combine a number of metrics and not just one calculation, including closing percentage, cost per acquisition, and cost per lead. And all of these have been rated as highly effective in communicating ROI. And it communicates ROI in a clear, concise method. And it's so important to do this rather than speaking of, oh, we have ROI of 453%. All of us as marketers know that's great, but, to the C-level or individuals in our organization, they may not have a clear understanding of how that's impacting revenue. So it's important to think about your return on investment as impacting the bottom line. And now we're going to go back to Matt for a minute so that he can cover our best practices in marketing analysis.
Yeah, so a lot of organizations do this really well. And some of us are out there just saying, this is great and all, but how do we do it? Where do we start? So, what can you do? Well, again, measure everything: leads, activities, clicks, opens, conversions, deals, and the percentages of the conversions between each of those areas. Again, trial and error. You will have programs that don't work. In fact, a good portion of your programs aren't going to be that effective. Take what works, get rid of the rest, again, like I was saying in my last section. But then how do you get there? So in this slide, what I've done is I've put together an example that will just help us walk through a scenario. This is obviously just a basic scenario just based on a media buy, but we should look at this on an aggregate level as well and some detailed level. So this is based on a media buy that we did. Not that we did, but that we're using as this example. So 10 years ago, all we looked at was CPM, cost per thousand. It was standard for a smart marketer. And we all agree that it's no longer the only or necessary measurement for B2B marketers and advertisers' effectiveness. So what we need to do is we need to start looking further down the process. So instead of CPM, then we started looking at CPC. And at the next point, we take it down to the opportunity, or the cost per lead. So we say, okay, we know how many people we've reached. We know how effective we were against reaching these people. We got this many clicks out of these programs. And as you look at them, program number 1 looks like it's definitely got the best CPM. Then you go to program number 2. If you start looking at that conversion to lead rate, that looks like a much better program. But then as we take that next step, you can bring it down to the opportunity level or even the deal. Or to say it differently, you need to be buying the most efficient media to net you the most in your top line revenue. So you might also take it a step further and track it, after the handoff to the leads that are not only being accepted but closed by sales. But we do have to look at things like how big are these deals. But keep in mind that other variables start to come into play. What's the geo? Who was the rep that was involved in this sale? Was it a competitive selling situation? So, it's a little bit more of a dicey situation when you look at the cost per deal and size of the deal, because there are other variables in there. But the key point to this is we were dead wrong if we looked at it the way that we looked at this 10 years ago. The cost per thousand, which looked like the cheapest opportunity, was a horrible return on the investment, where the much more expensive program on a cost per thousand and even on a cost per lead basis turned out to be a really good return. So just a different way of looking at things. Also, just as an aside, again, this is a hypothetical scenario, but in social media, the CPM isn't even relevant on the same levels that we would be talking about with paid advertising, but you can still track it in the same way. And really what matters is conversions. Companies should look for ways to track and measure this engagement to ensure that both inbound and outbound activities are always being tracked. Jen, do you want to take us on to the next practice?
Sure, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Now we're ready to get into our third practice, which is aligning with your sales team. And we're going to talk about how alignment between marketing and sales departments really drives revenue. And the lack of alignment that exists in a lot of B2B organizations today really stems from varied goals and rules within the organization. When you look at marketing's role and marketing's goals, marketing is think about branding, positioning, long-term success. And if you look at the sales department, they need to make their numbers every month and every quarter. And both goals and both frames of mind are extremely valuable to an organization, but how do we look at combining these goals into a unified strategy to align these departments to drive revenue? And how to best address this lack of teamwork and collaboration? This is exactly what we're going to cover in this section. So in our study, we asked organizations what they have found to be the best tactics in improving marketing and sales alignment and analysis. And our top tactics include regular communications of metrics during scheduled meetings. Here at the top, we have 57% of respondents indicating that regular communication of marketing and sales performance metrics was highly effective, as well as another 55% indicating that holding regular sales and marketing meetings was effective. And what this regular communication and these regular meetings does is it establishes accountability to both sales and marketing teams. Marketing is held accountable to deliver qualified leads to the sales pipeline, and sales is held accountable to follow up on those leads and close them and improve their closing rates. So what metrics are really the most important to communicate? And we're going to look at this analysis and this alignment coming up in this section with Matt.
So yeah, in today's web-enabled market, buyers are much more informed than ever. Directly accessing information throughout the web about your market, about your competition, and most importantly, about your solutions. So the funnel I just put up above, you'll see this thing repeated later in this presentation, but it really no longer begins with known prospects. By tracking prospects above the funnel, marketers can accurately score leads, place them in the appropriate nurturing path, and track ROI from initial click to deal close, while sales can appropriately follow up with the most sales-ready prospects. So this really isn't a sales process at all anymore. It's about a buying process, and sales has the opportunity to get involved much earlier, while marketing tends to stay involved much later with things like marketing automation, lead nurturing programs, etc. So how do you synchronize your sales and marketing efforts? Well, it really comes down to three things: people, processes, and systems. But even a bigger task is doing it. So the key to successfully aligning sales and marketing hinges obviously on these things. So when we look at this, we need to gain alignment. And by doing that, we need to do a couple of things. Define and agree on goals. So this sounds like, this would be pretty easy. And it's logical, right? Okay, what are we trying to do? How are we going to get there? Here's what we're doing. There's what you're doing. Unfortunately, in some organizations, in fact, most organizations, it's a huge hurdle because there have been very different goals to achieve and some politics that go along with that. So if you agree on those goals, those politics go away. Also agree on metrics. Not only are we going to agree on what we're trying to achieve in both of these organizations, but how we're going to measure it. So we have a common set of reports, potentially a common dashboard, complete transparency, and objectivity. So when sales comes in and says, marketing, the leads that you're providing are not good leads, and the ones that you do, or not enough leads, and the ones that you provide aren't high enough quality, marketing needs to sit down and say, okay, well, fine. If they're not, tell me what you need. Let's figure out how to get there, and we're both going to be equally accountable for these things. And then optimize again and repeat. This is the thing that's going to come up over and over again throughout this presentation. So then we need to look at something called Sales 2.0. This is something that we talked about at Genius for the last 3 or 4 years. So really, this is the crux of aligning sales and marketing to help a buyer-enabled prospect through the process. So what this is all about is cooperatively developing programs once you've defined what your goals are and how you're going to measure them. Establish what you need at each point in the funnel, going back to that funnel, and don't overcomplicate the process. So what happens is companies tend to go in and say, all right, so we've got all these goals that we need to achieve. Sorry, we had a little audio issue. Okay, I think we're back. So the next thing is also just encouraging usage of all the tools. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about how we get there. What are these processes and what are these systems? So marketing and sales need to jointly define where we're going. This is what it looks like. Are these qualified leads? Are these nurturing leads? Are these qualified for marketing, or should these go to the lead qualifying team? Do we have a team in place? So a lot of organizations they have a sales team, they have a marketing team, they don't have an inside sales or a lead qualifying team. So really think about new processes for the company. Also, when you define what a disqualification is, you need to be able to go in and say, okay, these leads came in and they didn't work for the sale. Does that mean that they need to be thrown away, or are some of these things okay to re-nurture, get back into the marketing system? And you have to have a process for getting those people back into the system. If they're truly horrible leads, let's take account of what these are and figure out a way to get better leads into the system. And then again, keep that line of communication open. Monitor as you go along, have planned meetings to report back what's working, what's not working from sales to marketing, and leverage sales as a tool to develop your marketing programs. They're much smarter about how the prospect is responding to what your brand message is, to what drove those prospects into the system. They know what's working. They don't necessarily know what's not working, but they definitely do know what is working based on what's going through and becoming a sale. So then let's look at some of the systems here. So if you want to implement a series of systems that will allow you to really combine both the sales and marketing process, just a few I'm going to name here, but things to really consider if you're not already doing it. Things like definitely implement a CRM system. If you're in business-to-business sales and you don't have a CRM system, stop selling until you get one. Honestly, it's the most important tool out there. Automated lead nurturing. Marketing automation systems plug directly into the sales, to the CRM system, having a way to actually separate the hot prospects from the not so hot prospects, a queue for your salespeople to call so they're not cold calling. So by having marketing automation systems in place, again, I'm oversimplifying this by just saying marketing automation, but the automated lead nurturing aspect of it is a crucial piece of the equation. And then just have a way to continually monitor and score these systems. That also is provided by a marketing automation system. That will help queue the hottest prospects for your salespeople. And timing is key. So no matter what systems you have, whether it's just a CRM system, a marketing automation system, even email marketing systems, when it comes to delivering hot prospects to sales, if that prospect has time to cool down, there's an issue. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but there's an opportunity time that shrinks very rapidly once a prospect takes a qualifying action. From the time that they take that action to the time that a sales rep actually follows up with them in a relevant manner. So moving on to best practice 4. Jen, do you want to take us through that?
Great. Thanks a lot, Matt. Yeah, we're going to next look at identifying your sales and marketing funnel. And what I'd like to do, if we're ready, is conduct a quick poll of the audience. I want to find out how many of you are sending your leads directly to sales. So that poll should be popping up now. If you could just indicate yes or no, we're just going to give you a few seconds to do this. So we appreciate your participation. All right, we have about 70% of our audience has voted, and over 50% of you are currently sending leads directly to sales. And what we're going to talk about is going to be extremely beneficial to this audience because we're going to look at the importance of identifying the sales and marketing funnel as opposed to just doing this practice of sending the leads right to sales. And we're going to look at how nurturing leads that are not phone ready are going to help you produce more high quality leads and help you address that #1 B2B marketing challenge for 2011. And in our study, we asked what was required of a lead to be sent to sales. What is a lead and what isn't a lead? And here we have 80% indicating lead has entered basic contact information on our lead form through our website. So this is an indication that if you don't have contact information, it's not a lead. That's 80%. And as I see here, 42%, that's a very low number for this figure. Only 42% of organizations are actually verifying a valid business need of their leads before passing them to sales. This is a huge missed opportunity. You don't want to send leads to your sales team if they don't have a valid business need for your product. This should be something that's considered before the handoff to sales. Because your B2B sales teams, they need opportunities that they can follow up on, not just inquiries. And this is also going to go back to your sales and marketing alignment. If you're sending your sales team these leads that maybe don't have a valid business need for your product, that's gonna upset your sales team, and that's not going to help you with your alignment process. So it's important to put up certain screens and barriers such as this valid business need before passing your leads to sales. And again, this should be predetermined between marketing and sales departments. And we also asked which stages of the marketing sales funnel were tracked by organizations. And as we saw earlier, lengthening sales cycles and a growing number of decision makers were 2 challenges included in the top challenges for 2011, and this leads to a complex sale. And we see that 71% of organizations are recognizing a registered lead as a funnel stage. And then the level of participation drops into the 40% range for the rest of the funnel stages. And if you're only recognizing a registered lead and no further funnel stages, you're not recognizing a funnel. And progression between these funnel stages can be optimized But identification and definition of these funnel stages must occur first before you can even think about nurturing leads through the process and developing highly qualified leads and sales opportunities for your sales team. So now we're going to go back to Matt for best practices in identifying your sales and marketing funnel.
Thanks, Jen. So going back again, sales and marketing are no longer separate entities when we look at this funnel. So we need to work together to achieve common set of goals. And they're not as different as you might think in terms of how you're going to solve them and what the effect is at the bottom line. So if we look at some of these things, the questions that a marketer might ask or a salesperson might ask is, marketers, how do I reach and listen and respond to relevant conversations? How do I identify prospects for my territory on the website? Very similar things that they have in common that they're all trying to solve throughout this process. But in order to address all of these needs, you need to develop a funnel that does three things. One, it needs to tell you where you've been. Two, where you currently are and how to get to where you want to be. So let's walk through this process a bit on the next set of slides here. So what we're doing is building a predictive model. So working from what you know, in order to build a predictive model, you need to look at the past. You have everything you need, but chances are, or you may have everything you need, but chances are you only have a portion of what's out there. Let's start with what we can gather from, let's say, this is a small to medium-sized business looking at about 1 quarter's data. So what do we know? Well, we know that you generated 5,000 inquiries in your program. How many of those were in profile? Well, there were about 3,750 of these. Of the 5,000 were in profile. Of those that became sales qualified, 1,125, and 113 of those became opportunities. 22 of those became deals. So then we look and say, okay, well, we know that we have an average sales price of $50,000, but we have a revenue target of $2 million. So how are we going to look at our funnel to determine how we're going to reach the goals that we need to reach of that $2 million? So we start by flipping it upside down, obviously, and we know that at $2 million and a $50,000 average sales price, you're going to have 40 deals that are necessary. So when we apply the right conversion rates from one stage to the next, if we look at this next slide here, we notice that, okay, so starting from the bottom, we knew that we had a 75% conversion based on our known funnel, 75% from inquiries to in profile, 30 from profile to sales qualified, 10 from sales qualified to opportunity, and 20% of those opportunities actually became deals. So when we reverse that, we know that we need to get 9,000 inquiries to reach the target that we're going after. Then you go in and you look at things like what's the marketing mix going to be based on what we know so far in order to reach this goal. Well, I know that with the amount of money that I have to spend and the programs that we generally have in place, I can go out and say, okay, here's what I'm going to need to do to generate the kinds of inquiries that generate to this kind of funnel. And then you can go out and say, okay, here's how much it's going to cost me, et cetera, and that's where you start building out your media plan. Again, I've definitely oversimplified this, but to paint the picture, you can clearly see how you can use your funnel, flip it upside down, and build a predictable plan. So the key is to do this on a regular basis, but you need to make sure that it's done on a granular level as well as an aggregate level. So each of your programs should have this applied to it so you know how to determine what that media mix will be, but also to do it on an aggregate level on an ongoing basis. So now what? How do you do this? Well, you've built the process from the bottom up and got the metrics to guide you to the correct number of leads you'll need in order to deliver the sales to deliver sales for your mutual success. So how can you stack the deck in your favor? The great thing about this model is that it's iterative, and you should look at what works and optimize. You can turn the dial at any point in the funnel, and you can see the impact of the bottom line. It's really simple. So if you were to change the conversion rate from the total inquiries to the amount of in profile, that number below would go up. So everything below that would go up. Or you can say, okay, I've optimized as much as I can given what I have at the top of the funnel. I have no more money to spend against this program, but let's see what we can do to increase the number of opportunities to deals, or the in profile to opportunities. So you can see that, at any point in the process, you can actually turn that dial a little bit up or down to really affect that bottom line. So moving on to best practice number 5, Jen's going to take you through lead management practices.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we're going to look at automating your lead management practices, and we're going to look at how to define, automate, and optimize lead scoring, nurturing, and management processes. Because when we talk about marketing automation, it is a process, not just a technology. Of course, the technology facilitates the process. However, if marketers don't take the time to map out a funnel and lead nurturing management process, the software itself it's not going to benefit your business. The benefit is in the process. And much like this production line for cars, we're going to look at automating your process throughout the funnel. And we're going to measure marketing's contribution to sales pipeline through this automation process. And you're going to be able to clearly define how many qualified opportunities you're filling that pipeline with. And also, this is going to ultimately improve your sales team's efficiency and to lead to an increase in revenue, because your sales team is going to be focusing on highly nurtured, highly qualified prospects. So the majority of B2B organizations are establishing marketing automation procedures. When we asked our survey participants about this in our B2B study, we learned that the majority of organizations were either intending to implement, partially implemented, or fully implemented. And 80% of organizations have established processes for marketing automation. We see here in this small slice, we have no repeatable process for performing this, 20%. We have a formal process we routinely perform, which is 43%. And we have an informal process at 37%. And the reason why organizations who are implementing marketing automation procedures have these processes in place is because when you purchase a solution, you're not just purchasing a software program, you're purchasing the ability to establish this process for your organization. And many automation providers will assist you with coaching on setting up your processes. So now we're going to go back to Matt to go over best practices in marketing automation.
Thanks, Jen. So I'm just going to take you through a very high-level process here so you can see the benefits of marketing automation, how you can optimize your marketing programs and really, truly carry people through the purchasing process. So the keys to this are to, start on a high level. So have the ability to anonymously track people before you know who they are. Develop a relevant dialogue with your prospects to help pull them through the buying process. And implement the lead scoring, or the queue of leads that go to your sales team in a timely manner. So the note here, though, is to be inclusive in design. When we talk about creating a queue of the most qualified leads to send to sales, people generally think, okay, fine, I am going to put these lead nurturing programs into place, and I'm going to hold on to all these leads, and only on that day that this person says, all right, I'm 100% ready, I'm going to hand this over to sales. That has proven to be dead wrong. So what we would like to do is create a system that says, okay, anybody who clearly does come out and jump out and does some sort of behavior, they're the right title, they need to be contacted by sales, make sure that no matter what happens, that gets into the hands of a sales rep in the second that it needs to happen. However, salespeople tend to go through their queue of prospects pretty quickly if they're efficient. So at some point they're going to say, okay, well, I don't have anybody raising their hand right now. Who do I call? They're either going to say, okay, I have nobody to call. Marketing isn't providing us leads. Or they're going to go in and they're just going to start cold calling anybody that's in the system. So if the system is inclusive in nature, it doesn't hold out those prospects from salespeople, but it queues them up and says, okay, these are your most qualified people. So for instance, if you have lead scoring in there and you have to reach 100 before it gets handed over to a sales rep to call, they can say, okay, I want to see all the people between 95 and 100, and I want to call those people first. So just a little piece to touch on before we jump into the dynamics of marketing automation. So marketing automation is a really intricate process, so I'm going to keep it pretty high level again. I've flipped the funnel on its side here to illustrate a more streamlined approach to helping move prospects through the buying process by leveraging marketing automation and lead nurturing. So let's start by extending your reach. So how do you better reach and engage with prospects interested in your market and solutions? So one note here is that, things like social media, there's over 50 million people on LinkedIn, over 100 million people on Twitter, 500 million on Facebook, who increasingly use these channels to find solutions to solve their business problems, and answer their work-related questions. So today's marketer can take advantage of this new buying process to extend awareness and influence their purchasing decisions by using things like trackable URLs that are specifically designed to track both traditional and things like social media, marketing campaigns, things that are ad hoc as well as things that are programmatized. Also including, which would include things like Google AdWords, online ads, blogs, press releases. But the key is to understand who your prospects are, what they're doing, how they're engaging, so you can provide viable content and, almost like baiting a conversation with them, getting them to engage with you into the next step in the process, which is to elicit a response. So this is really the most interesting part, because what happens after you actually get them interested and you get them to come to your website? So you can drive them to all kinds of content that you provide there. And despite all the hype about social media, most marketers aren't really sure how to measure its effectiveness. Along with most traditional methods like Google AdWords and et cetera, marketers rely on cost per click still. And again, going back to what we were just talking about, they're not really, tracking how people are coming in, but they also don't have the systems to respond to them in a manner in which is relevant to what those people are looking for. So you can have things like intelligent auto-response emails that are sent to people if they come to your website, and once you get them to engage into a relationship, and that's really where the lead nurturing aspect of the marketing automation starts. So Jen, if you can forward it a couple clicks here. So here we go. So the key point here is once you get these people to respond, get them to submit their information, they download a white paper, they sign up for something, they submit their name, you not only know who they are today based on what they just did, but backing it out to above the funnel, that, like we were just talking about, where they came from. It could have been 6 months ago that they first engaged with you. They came to your website from a press release. They came back again 2 weeks later from an AdWord that they saw or a banner ad that was out there. They've reviewed multiple pages of content on your website. Now they've downloaded a white paper, so you know who they are, and you can put all that background information, which can now trigger that relationship aspect. And that's where the automated lead nurturing comes in and says, okay, I'm going to send these people relevant, valuable information that will help pull them through the process. So a lot of times this is email. You can tie this to, obviously, things like lead scoring based on how they respond, what the next communication is going to be based on who they are and what they've done on your website, continuing through the process. But then ultimately, the goal is to drive revenue. So ultimately, marketing must really feed sales. And if it doesn't, it's kind of, not lived up to its promise. So when a prospect is consuming the relevant content, either reaching a lead score threshold or exhibiting a predefined behavior like signing up for a demo or something of your product or submitting their information for more information, that indicates that they're ready to buy. It's critical to get them matched up with a sales rep in a really timely manner. So when the salesperson has the right information at the right time, it serves the interest of both parties because the prospect is getting the information that's relevant to them. They're getting what they need, what they want, when they want it, and the salesperson is having all the right conversations. So to wrap that up, it's really about the 4 R's again: reach, extend reach with social media, online ads, any kind of linkable content that you're putting out on the internet, elicit responses to drive prospects through to the website, build a relationship through intelligent lead nurturing, and drive more revenue by better arming sales with truly sales-ready leads and providing those prospects with valuable conversations and content to help them make a purchase decision. But remember, it doesn't end at the sale. You do need to create advocacy. You do need to drive upsell, et cetera, and that's what marketing automation will give you.
Thanks a lot, Matt. I'm just going to summarize the key topics that we've covered in our webinar today on 2011 Top B2B Marketing Practices. First, we looked at knowing your marketing mix, where we talked about the importance of identifying the most effective lead generation channels for your organization and how to do this. We also looked at closing the loop with sound marketing analytics, and we looked at evaluating marketing ROI with a number of metrics, not just a straight calculation, and how to analyze your marketing channels and how to use what's working and nix what's not. And then we looked at aligning with your sales team, where we talked about how transparency and objectivity is going to help you with this alignment to ultimately drive collaboration and teamwork between these departments and improve revenues. Then we looked at identifying your sales and marketing funnel, where we talked about how important it was to identify a funnel to deliver valid opportunities to your sales team and not just inquiries. And finally, as Matt just covered for us, we looked at tying it all together with automating your lead management practices. So thank you again, everyone, for attending today's webinar. We do have a few minutes to address some of the great questions that our audience has entered today. I have a first question. How does the industry define the difference between prospects and leads? This is a really great question, and the main difference between prospects and leads generally is a difference of inquiries and valid opportunities, right? So a prospect or an inquiry is anyone that comes in through your lead form or responds to a lead generation activity in some other manner, like a phone call, a direct response card, or whatever call to action you guys are currently using. And that lead may be a valid opportunity, that inquiry rather, or it may not. It may be someone who does not have a valid business need for your organization, or it might be someone who is simply interested in downloading the white paper that you had on your site. So those are the inquiries or the prospects. And generally, the leads are those prospects who meet certain criteria. And this, again, this criteria must be determined between marketing and sales departments. So the prospect moves into a lead stage when they meet this certain criteria or develop a certain lead score, again, with all the criteria agreed upon between marketing and sales. This may be, a certain budget that they have, or they all should have a valid business need, or, maybe they meet a certain target profile of being in an industry or a certain organization size. These definitions are going to vary by organization. Matt, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Actually, that's just what I was going to say, is that, the vernacular of the difference between leads, opportunities, contacts, prospects is really different within an organization or within different organizations. But the key is to just make sure that within your organization, that's just going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the presentation, is have an agreement between executive staff, sales, and marketing, what the difference is between each of these, so you are working toward that common conversion set, the common set of goals, and the common measurement.
Thanks, Matt. I have seen a number of questions regarding the slides for today's presentation. I want to remind everyone that the slides will be available post-webinar. You'll receive an email from Marketing Sherpa tomorrow, which will include the slides from today's webinar. It will also include a recording as well as your complimentary chapter on marketing automation from the 2011 report. We do still have a few more minutes here, so we can take a couple more questions. And we do have a final poll coming up for you guys after these final questions. Our next question, maybe Matt, you can handle this one, is what activities do you include under the category of lead nurturing?
So lead nurturing is really, it's more of a process than it is about just activities, but the activities that are primarily involved are everything from emails to direct mail, trying to prompt people to take the next step in the process. So what I mean by that is if somebody is very high up in the process and they're trying to solve a problem, or they may not even know they have a problem, they're just interested in saving money for their organization. You want to get them to that next phase, which is an interest or knowledge of the fact that they can solve that problem. And they can solve the problem by doing something that the philosophy of your company can solve, or of a category can solve. Once they agree that, wow, this category can help solve my problems, you want to be able to take them on to that next stage in the process, which is when they say, wow, here's a set of products that can solve my problem. So it's a matter of just constantly communicating people in an appropriate time frame with appropriate information to pull a prospect through the buying process. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Okay, we have just about enough time for one more question before the poll. And this question came in, and it was, what do you view as the most important metrics to monitor? Matt had a great example on this earlier in the webinar on marketing analysis, where he showed us the example of the company that was looking at cost per lead as opposed to cost per sale. And cost per lead, it can be kind of misleading, because if you're always just focused on getting the lowest cost per lead, those may not be the best leads coming into your system or the most valuable leads. So you really want to look at things like return on investment. And again, you want to look at this in a practical method with dollar amounts, and you want to communicate it that way as well. You want to look at cost per acquisition. Look at metrics that are going to impact the bottom line of your organization. What ones are contributing to the sales pipeline? Number of qualified leads. What's going to contribute to your organization's revenue? As marketers, we really need to think about tying our activities into the bottom line, and we always need to be focused on this. And each organization is going to need to develop their own list of metrics that are going to be most impactful for their organizations. But my recommendation would be to focus on the bottom line. Matt, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Focus on the bottom line. But in terms of the layering areas, so there's different organizations out there that have different names for these things, like their sales waterfall or the funnel or what have you. But each of these phases is really important to the marketer. You need to know what your conversion rates are generally from your leads to your, how many of your leads are actually in your target profile. Of those leads that are in your target profile, how many of those made it to the point that they became ready for sales to follow up with, etc. But I think the key in this is that while you're measuring this and it's important to you, that you should be able to be confident in the numbers and pull out a lot of those layers when developing reports and recommendations for other groups, like the executive staff, or even with sales sometimes, to be able to say, hey, look, if we generate, with what we know about the middle of this funnel, if we generate this many raw leads or raw prospects or inquiries, we will get this number of opportunities. That should be all some of those people need, but the point is not to always focus on all the granularity all the time.
All right, and that wraps up all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, Matt. I want to remind everyone that you have a discount available sponsored by Genius of 100%, not 100%, that'd be a really good discount, right? $100 off your 2011 B2B Marketing Benchmark Report. And before you go, we'd like you to participate in another quick poll. Just kindly indicate yes or no if you would like a free account for Genius. And kindly indicate yes or no. Matt, if you want to talk more about this, what they get for that.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about things like lead nurturing and all the aspects that go into it and how to get started. It seems like a lot of people are not ready to take that first step, not ready to make the investment. So what we've done is we've gone and made our middle product line, which is our demand generation product, available as a free product. So if anybody's interested in getting their hands on it, seeing how it works, go ahead. It's completely free. It's not a trial. It doesn't expire. It's a full product that will allow you to have all the capabilities to track social media, to track all your inbound marketing with your trackable links, all your online advertising, as well as all the email marketing components that go along with it.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for today, and we apologize for any questions we did not get to address live. However, if you do want to submit them on Twitter via the hashtag SherpaB2B, we will be sure to follow up with you on Twitter. And also, if you are interested in this $100 off discount provided by Genius on the 2011 B2B Marketing Benchmark Report, you can access that via the URL on this page. And thanks again for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.